Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast, episode number 280 of the show. I already had 280 episodes. I have 6 new reviews for you this week on the show, and that's going to include Lord January, a LitRPG Cultivation, Saga, Year of the Sword, book number 1. Also going to be reviewing Dangerous Gamble, Lucky Voice, book number 4. Also Airship Privateers, The Secret of the Old Ones, book number 2. Also Paths of Power, Initialization, book number 1. Eternal Dominion, book number 1. And The Disillusionist, The LitRPG Misadventures, Fetch Quest, and Bog Gods. So 6 new titles for you folks here to review. Before we get into that, of course, we're going to go into LitRPG News. And in LitRPG News, we're just going to have one quick, nice little story here. Dakota Crowd and the good folks at Mountaindale Press are releasing both the audiobook and the ebook for Anything, Full Murder Hobo, book number 2. It's going to actually come out a month ahead of the Amazon/Audible release, and it's going to be on their very own site and platform. There are going to be several book bundles where you can save money if you haven't had a chance to pick up book number 1 or the audiobook for book number 1, or if you want all of them together, audiobook and ebooks, you get extra great deals. This is actually a great way to support one of the best authors in the genre and save yourself some money. And truly, it is a great way to support your authors because Amazon takes a really good cut, the cut of the purchase price when you purchase through them. They're the service to the platform. So yes, but through Audible, they take upwards of 70% or more. Only the leftover bit goes to the actual content producers there. So this is actually a wonderful way to pick up an audiobook. It's cheaper than getting an Audible. And all the money is going towards the actual content producers. So definitely, if you're interested in getting these great stories, I would super encourage you to go to their website at mountaindalepress.store, and you can pick them up and get them sent to you in whatever format you're looking for. Go through the process, and you'll be doing a great thing for yourself and for a good company. Okay, on the stuff that's out now, we're going to start off with the stuff that's been released since the last episode of the podcast. That's going to include Otherworld, a LitRPG adventure, Epic Blade, book number 1. Also Invasion, this Viceroy's Pride, book number 2. Also out from Jonathan Brooks is going to be Dungeon of Chance, All In, the 3rd book in the Serious Probability series. Also out is Mech Slasher, Captain Overdrive, book number 1, from the kind of the only giant mech LitRPG story writer in the genre, Ryan Tang. Also out is Dragon Riders of Lon, Climbing Dragon Towers, book number 2. Also out is the RPG Apocalypse, book number 2. Also the 3rd book in the Eternal Dominion series, Concessions. We're actually reviewing the 1st book in the series. And look, book 3 is already out. Also out now for you to enjoy is Tower Climber Terry. Also out is Oni Umishio Mojito, High Tables Hijinks, book number 4. Also out is the 2nd book in the System Apocalypse Australia, book number 2 in that series, because it's called Flat Out, written by Tao Wong and Katie Hanna. Also out to enjoy is Shaman's Call, Spirit Song, the book that has been had been pushed back from its original release date probably about 3 times, I think. It is finally out for you to enjoy. Also out is Primacy Online, book number 6, City of Sky. Also out is Griff Markson's Sun Forsaken. The 8th book in the Bad Guy series is out for you to enjoy as well, as is the 4th book in the Infinite World series, Brambles and Thorns. This one never looks like a LitRPG story, and the novel description never talks about that way, but it definitely is. It's one of the series I've enjoyed all the way through. 8 out of 10, I think, for most of the books in the series. Also out is We the People, a kingdom building LitRPG. So all kinds of great stuff for you to enjoy as ebooks, but there are also some great audiobooks that are out. That includes Mercenary Manager, The Fantasy World of Dorban, book number 2. Also Virtual Horizon, Thousand Tales, book number 1. Also out is The Heavenly Throne, book number 7, for you folks who enjoy that Cultivation series. Also out is An Old Man's Journey, a LitRPG adventure. Also out is Summoner, Quick Change, volume 3. Also out is Awaken Online, Happy by Travis Bagwell. This is a side series. Also from the wonderful Vasily Mahenko. This is a Russian translation story called Idea Starting Point series. This is actually almost a prequel to some of his other series that have come out recently. I had a great time reading it though, so hopefully the audiobook is just as good. Also out from the Russian translators is Cool Down Unfrozen series. Also is a 2nd book in the Fey Nexus series, Lich Hollow. The 10 Realms, book number 9 in the series, but the title is The Seventh Realm Part 2. Exactly. There's a lot of numbers in this thing. By the amazing Michael Chatfield is out for you to enjoy. Other Worlds is out as an audiobook as well as an ebook apparently. And Monster Hunter NYC book number 2 is out for you to enjoy as an audiobook. So many great titles out for you as well to enjoy as audiobooks as well as ebooks. I know it's the beginning of February. A lot of those new Audible credits are going out right now. So you have a lot of things to choose from. Okay, on to stuff that's coming out in the near future or upcoming LitRPG section. I just remember if you're an author and you have something that's coming out that I haven't listed here or I just happen to not be able to find, that is a LitRPG story, feel free to send us a notification of that. We'll pop it in our list here. You can send that to feedback at geekbytespodcast.com or litrpgpodcast@gmail.com. Either way, or you can shoot me a message on Facebook. Also, let's see. So we're going to start off with February the 7th. That'll be Tao Wong's Adventures on Brad, book number 9, The Royal Ending. On February the 8th, it is going to be The Houndsman, book number 2. On February 8th as well, it'll be a short story from the amazing Jonathan Brooks called Valentine Core, a holiday dungeon core novella. It's actually one of the few LitRPG authors who writes anything revolving around a holiday. And I think he's done a lot of them, like Christmas, Halloween. He does one every Halloween for a new Dungeon Core story. I think he's trying to hit all the major holidays. So yeah, something nice to promote. But he has a Valentine's Day Dungeon Core novella coming out on February the 8th. On February the 8th as well, it'll be Dungeon Hearts Hell's Gate, which is, I think, the 3rd or 4th book in the series. It didn't say in the title, though. On February the 9th, it'll be A Touch of Power, book number 4, Insight by J. Boyce. On February the 10th, it'll be We Hunt Monsters. There you go, that's the title. February the 14th, a new Russian translation story from Alexander Romanov, who's written some other stuff that you might have enjoyed. This one is going to be a fantasy one called Black Centurion. On February the 14th, it'll be Drone Captain, Drone Rising, book number 2. February the 14th as well, it'll be Elemental Mastery, book number 1, Tempest. On February the 15th, it'll be Legend of Ranelagh Ghost Town, book number 2. On February 16th, the second book in the Year of the Short series. We're actually going to review the book 1 in the series on the podcast today. This one is going to be called Lady February for the one coming out on February the 16th, though. Excuse me. On February the 17th, it'll also be Chaos, Sparta Online, book number 2. On February 21st, Immersion Online, The Symbiont, book number 3. On February the 22nd, Blessed Time, book number 3. On February 22nd as well, it'll be Defiance of the Fall, book number 4. February 24th, Captain Overdrive, book number 2. February 25th, it'll be Discardium, book number 10. February 28th, Alpha Physics, book number 4. February 28th, it'll be the Dungeon Slayer series, book number 4. February 28th, it'll be the Butcher's Masquerade, Dungeon Crawler Carl, book number 5. On March the 1st, Bad as Dorcam, book number 1. March the 1st as well, it'll be the System Apocalypse, book number 12. System Finale, which I believe is the last book in this particular series. On March the 1st, it'll be The Way of It All, book number 5, called Outranked. On March the 1st, Age of Iron, and the Rise of Mankind series, book number 3. On March the 2nd, it'll be Sigma World, book number 6. March the 2nd as well, it'll be Full Murder Hobo, book number 2, Anything. Now, this particular link is for the Amazon release. I believe the audiobook will be out at the same time around there. But again, you can actually pick up this book right now through the publisher's website at mountaindalepress.store. On March the 7th, it'll be Apocalypse Nights, book number 2. On March the 8th, it'll be The Primal Hunter, a LitRPG adventure. March the 9th, it'll be Virgil's Fire, a Portal Fantasy LitRPG, Dr. Druid, book number 2. March the 11th, it'll be Bone Knights, book number 7. March the 14th, The Buccaneers Due, book number 3. March the 15th, Apocalypse Cultivation, book number 1, Trojan Nightmare. On March the 16th, The Towers of Acalia, book number 6 in that series. On March the 16th, Viceroy's Pride, book number 3, called Fractured Earth. On March 22nd, the Tion trilogy, called Lost Souls, a new series. On March the 23rd, it'll be the third book in the Year of the Sword series from Dakota Crowd, called Dokeshi March. On March 24th, The Good Guys, book number 13. On March 29th, A Unwitting Prince. On March 30th, Unfrozen, book number 4, Killer Play. On April the 5th, it'll be Markster Chef, book number 2, called Into the Fire. April the 5th, it'll be He Who Fights with Monsters, book number 5. On April the 11th, the Project Stellar book number 6 called Legat. On April the 12th, it'll be Kyrios, the Last Gods book number 1. On April the 14th, the Raid on the Inferno, the Range book number 4. On April the 18th, Alpha Rome book number 4. On April 26th, Jeff the Game Master book number 3. On April 26th, Epic Blade book number 2. And April the 30th, the second book in the Mana Harvester series. So there you go, all kinds of stuff coming out in the near future for you to enjoy. On to the new releases and reviews. Okay, first review for the week is going to be Lord January, a LitRPG Cultivation Saga Year of the Sword book number 1, written by Dakota Kraut. It is 427 pages, $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Time is money. Time is a what? Time is running out. Grant Leap is an orphaned, mortal farmhand in a world where cultivation methods and weapons of power are jealously guarded and only passed down among family. He's not content with his lot. As a Januarian, someone living in a district January, he should be living the good life just like everybody else. Foods, parties, food, entertainment, and food are the minimum requirements. As an orphan, especially a rival Leap, there's not even a chance of him being treated as human. When a celestial event pours time magic into his field, coalescing into a lost weapon of power, Grant leaps at the opportunity to advance beyond even the scope of standard cultivation. At the first touch of the weapon, the orphan gains everything he's ever wanted, a sword and a name. Also, a pesky mandatory quest with his life as a price of failure. It doesn't take him long to realize that the best thing for him to do is to sell it and live on borrowed time. Yet, that would never happen. The blade offers him the first major choice he's ever had to make: surrender to his desires or live like a king. There we go. And I think that's a pretty good description of like the setup for the series. It doesn't really describe like what's happening for the rest of it though. The story kind of combines a kind of physical cultivation technique with RPG progression. The main character is a Leap, one of the few people born on a leap day, February 29th. As such, he's relegated to a slave position in his society and for his entire life is forced to work for his master, at least until a magic sword lands in front of him and he gets the quest to defeat the Lord of the Land, Lord January, as the first step to restore the world's balance. What follows is a journey of the main character to learn the ways of the sword, get into shape, and stumble through the world to get to his goal while avoiding the forces that want to stop him. It's a lot of training and fighting and a good bit of world building. So there you go. On the RPG side of things, really consistent stuff. The main character increases his stats, cultivation levels through completing quests, defeating opponents, or killing them. It's kind of given a choice. Training also improves his stats. There's a unique aspect to the progression system in that you're cultivating time and increments like seconds, minutes, hours, days, all the way up to, of course, weeks, months, and years. It's kind of the theme of the series with like the Lord January kind of bit. Each one, like the districts, has a different month's name, January, February, etc., which will correspond, I think, to the releases of the books. They're used as a kind of progression currency instead of experience points, but also as a currency in the world. So like you're paid for food in seconds, like 3 seconds worth of whatever, maybe like renting a room for minutes or an expensive piece of equipment for days. And it kind of lies up in that calendar kind of theme in this series. This I'll be honest, this is probably the most heavily criticized book I think Dakota Kraut has ever written. Reading some of the reviews and reading it myself, I'm like, oh yeah, I can see what they mean. So some of the things that we're talking about are things that I don't necessarily have an issue with, but I think they've been repeated in the reviews enough to bring them up, of course. One of the biggest criticisms I think that I kind of agree with is the fact that the main character is unrealistically naive. And I think this is at least partially showing up. I think part of the issue is that this is already themed to be like a 12-book series for one character, going along with the months of the year. And I want to say that the author might have all these books already written. So when he's planning out the progression for the character, that's a lot of space to cover. It's a lot of like progression to have in place. And so I think in this first book, he's left as a naive character because that's kind of how you're going to space it out for 12 books. Like you can't instantaneously go from slave to super genius. But what ends up happening in the actual story is that he keeps making like the same poor decisions or naive decisions again and again and again. And I think it kind of got on some of the readers' nerves, or at least made it feel unrealistic. And for me, I kind of felt that way as well. The main character in the story is treated almost as a slave. He's regularly beaten, not only by his master, but also by the population as a whole. In the grand scheme of things, like it's revealed later on in the story, this is minor spoiler, that leaps like himself were regularly murdered and killed by other cities or other locations besides where he's at. And so with that kind of attitude, it felt really weird to me, at least, that the main character would still be really kind, that he would continually trust people with his secrets, that he wouldn't be hesitant to trust these people who you would assume like we're going to beat him because of what his position is. And throughout the entire story, he kind of never learns the lesson of not trusting people. Even though he's told repeatedly by various sources, including his magic sword, don't tell people his weaknesses, don't tell people your secrets. And I understand within the context of story building and advancing the plotline that some things have to occur for some plot developments and some surprise twists. They weren't really twists to me. But it kind of happens repeatedly throughout the story, even all the way up to almost the very end of the story. And I guess for me, it didn't feel like a consistent outcome for how he's treated throughout his entire life as a servant class. You feel like because of the way he's treated, for me at least, I would have thought he'd been super suspicious of everybody, not trusting anybody at all, always wanting to get revenge. And that's just not who the character is. Now, on the positive side, I'll say that the author is super consistent with this behavior. He made a choice. He stuck with it throughout the entire novel. So, there's that. But for me, that's not really huge. The main character is going to be who he's going to be. Another criticism of the story, and I'm not sure how much I agree with this necessarily, but it is repeatedly mentioned in quite a few reviews that the novel fat shames. And I want to say like this is sort of true, but for me at least, I think that it's definitely a reflection of the culture in this district versus an outside perspective. Because the main character grows up in a district where there's a super abundance of food, and there's lore and the story to explain why. But it's because there's so much food that's meant for like essentially a population 7 times that size. Nobody has to starve. Like food is given away freely, and there's lots of luxurious food for everybody. And it's not super expensive necessarily, but like a lot of the culture in the short revolves around eating essentially this excess food. Doesn't quite make sense to me on an economic scale why a district will continue to produce that much food. But that's a different, that's a separate issue. But that's what the culture is. All the cultivation in the story revolves around, in this district revolves around eating. The more you eat, the stronger you're going to get, the better your cultivation is. Again, there's a whole cultivation, theory and practice to revolving around eating more food, and the more powerful you are, the richer you are, the bigger you're going to be. That's kind of the culture here, and it's been that way for hundreds of years. And the kind of fat shaming kind of comes into play from the perspective of the magical sword. It has a personality, talks, and so while the main character is training, the character that is the sword, I think is based on a kind of a drill sergeant mentality from kind of our world. Although that's not explicitly stated, even though he's called Sarge. It has that kind of put down mentality, like you're terrible, you're this and that. You're fat, you're a big slug, and I can't believe you want to be this way. It's that point of view, but I always feel like that's just kind of a contrary point of view of a entity that has existed outside of this particular culture. And so from his point of view, everybody's obese, everybody's super unhealthy to his mindset. And so there is that kind of training mentality. Now, where they think that's appropriate or not, or it's fat shaming, that's up to you. But I definitely understand where that point of view is coming from, especially with some of the terrible things, I'll be honest, that this character Sergeant kind of says when he's training the main character. Like he definitely insults people he doesn't know, is by saying they're killing themselves, they're being lazy, they should be ashamed for letting themselves get obese, how much better a person is when he loses weight. And it just, for me, it felt, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I get that criticism that's happening in the story. It is what it is. It very much is part of like the differences in lore. For me, as somebody who's like familiar with this, I'm like, yeah, this is actually not untrue, in that the wealthier you are, the bigger you are. Like being heavy was a sign of wealth historically, because in an agrarian society, like only the wealthy had enough money to like eat healthy, eat rich foods, eat meat on a regular basis. So that's not untrue, I guess. So there you go. But again, it's kind of a weird. It kind of just follows the setup of the story and takes it to these interesting and sometimes extreme, I guess, that didn't always sit so well with some people. So there you go. Overall, I think the story was okay for me. It's not my favorite book that the author's ever written. I think part of the issue is for me that I'm not huge into Cultivation in the first place. So that's probably what part of it is for me. But the other issues did weigh down on me. Like, I didn't like the attitude of Sarge as a character. I did think of like, yeah, that's kind of fashioning of that, I guess. Like, but it's really just that character. Like the rest of the characters in the story, it's their culture. It's their things that they're used to, so they don't see it that way. But like some of the story does come across that way. For me, I don't really care about it too much. I didn't really try, but it did kind of lessen my enjoyment because I didn't enjoy that particular attitude of that character, so I didn't really like him, even though he was doing other great things for the main character. Additionally, I had a really hard time wanting the main character to succeed, and that's not a great thing. I just hard time connecting with such a naive character because, as I said it before, I feel like the outcome of being treated like a slave your entire life wouldn't be that you're kind and you're trusting of everybody, no matter their circumstances. So I felt like that was hard for me to kind of accept, and then main character making the same mistakes over and over. And again, I understand that his growth has to take place over 12 books, so that's probably part of the reason that the character maintains that attitude throughout the entire story. The main character does progress in other ways. He definitely grows in martial power. He grows in gaining friends and adventures, and he has all this great stuff. And there's plenty of action in the story. The martial arts stuff, action stuff, is really nicely done. There's like some really good lore building in developing the lore of the world as a whole, but also like this particular district. So much so that people invest in the things that other people say about it. So I guess that's a good thing. I just found it hard to root for the character a little bit. So for me, I didn't enjoy as much as I did other stories from the author, but still, on the whole, pretty decent story. I understand that this is just kind of the beginning for the main character in the story. And so I'm sure his growth is going to be paced appropriately for what seemed to be a 12-book series. But for me, it gets a score of 7.2 out of 10. That's still a good score, just on the lower side of enjoyment. That's Lore January, a LitRPG Cultivation Saga, Year of the Sword, book number 1, with the score of 7.2 out of 10. Okay. Next up is going to be Dangerous Gamble, Lucky's Voice, book number 4, written by Daniel Scheenhofen. It is 509 pages, $4.98. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. Life had gotten both better and more chaotic for Doc. He's already been happy with Fiala and Sonia as his wives, but then Elia and Leah joined his family. To top it off, he called her the willing dryad Rosa. With 5 wives at his side, Doc had a full house of love. He was still in the town of Deep Gulch, needing to achieve the mission Luck had given him, when Sheriff Grange killed Mayor Goodman. It removed the least of Doc's trouble while showing that Grange was clearly a problem. Even with the mayor out of the way, there was still plenty to take care of. The first annual poker tournament at the Lily was coming up. The card-sharp Mr. Swayze, was one of Doc's biggest roadblocks to freeing the town. He had a plan for him, but it would be a gamble. Luckily, his patron goddess was Lady Luck. Even if he dealt with Swayze, Doc would have to handle Grange as well. The sheriff wanted him gone so he could move on Leah. On top of that, the Church of Epoch was still a threat. In Deep Gulch, that meant Adam McLean, preacher Epoch, would have to be removed. Doc had managed to lie to and placate the preacher, but he knew it would come to a head soon. With all the trouble building, a dangerous gamble would have to be made. Doc knew he had allies of his own, some of them townsfolk, the ore smelter clan in town, and of course his lovely talented wives. Trusting in his goddess, Doc embarked on his plan to rid Deep Gulch of the darkness. There you go. I'll be honest, that novel description is longer than my actual review. This is a delightful read whose action and pacing was on point and did a good job of creating tension from non-combat situations like a gambling tournament. The story also gave me these resolutions I had found a little wanting in the last book, and I thoroughly enjoyed seeing the bad guys finally get their comeuppance. Adult content still exists in the story, but it's very skippable, and it isn't. I think the author says he always tries to keep it under 10% of every novel. But again, it's skippable. It's not my thing. Very easy to skip over. Not a big deal. Overall, good read. Gets an easy score of 7.6 out of 10. Dangerous Gamble. Lucky's Voice, book number 4, with a score of 7.6 out of 10. I had a nice time. It really, really was nice. I got to say, I was happy to see all these resolutions that happened. Finally, I was like, oh, okay, bam, taking care of that guy. We're good to go. So good stuff. 7.6 out of 10 for Dangerous Gamble, Luck's Voice. Okay, next up is going to be Airship Privateers, Secrets of the Old Ones, book number 2, written by Blaze Corbin. It is 173 pages, $2.99. It's available on Kindle Limited, and here's the author's description. Trent Nogiro plays as Vale Departed in a massive culture redefining deep dive VR game, Secrets of the Old Ones. The game feels like reality, a better version of reality. The primary form of entertainment on Earth is to either play SSO or watch those who do. After becoming a streamer and a professional gamer, Trent abruptly discovered how dark and ruthless the real world can be. Now he does what he can to search for those who threatened his loved ones. His regular job remains growing his career as Vale, a member of one of the most powerful streaming parties in SOO. The new PvP element of the Secret of the Old Ones offers unprecedented opportunities for player investment and quest rewards. But a growing faction of inhuman players are threatening human-controlled lands, razing cities to the ground. Human characters like Vale might actually lose the war. And with everything else going on in his life, Trent feels a growing suspicion that something is amiss in the real world, something related to the game. Okay, here is my read. It's an easy read. It's not a long novel. It's a nice short read that advances the MMO adventuring of the main character and his group at friends and adds a nice dash of real life danger. And I really actually enjoy that last little dash of real life adventure as a consequence. It kind of sets up at least the threat of things relating to the game, in addition to like the actual like MMO stuff of like going up particular quest lines and figuring and getting hints on things. It has nice little plot points. It's pretty succinct because it is getting a shorter story, which means there's kind of less fluff, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I enjoyed the read, especially the ending, and I only wish I could learn to use the rapier as well as the main character. And if you read the story, I kind of get what I mean. Okay, that gives it a score of 7.5 out of 10. That's Airship Privateers, Secret of the Old Ones, book number 2, with a score of 7.5 out of 10. Okay, on to our next review of the story. It's going to be The Passive Power and Initialization, book number 1, written by Sean Barber. It is 379 pages, $4.99. It's available on Kindle Limited, and here's the novel description. A mid-30s truck driver, must make hard choices on his quest to get home to his family while the world as we know it comes to an end. 700 miles, no truck, and just his loyal dog to accompany him. Can he survive in this world? A world where the system spawns monsters and mutates plants and animals to absorb and refine essence. Let us find out. There we go. Short and sweet, and that definitely encapsulates the premise of the story. It's a RPG apocalypse story that allows people who are continent to choose one of three passive power, rather. Divine, so you get your priest and stuff. Cultivation, and mana. The mana stuff essentially comes down to like regular RPG progression stuff. So you get to choose between, I think, 4 different classes, like your basic, I think, mage, warrior, thief, and something else. I can't remember. The main character chooses cultivation. And so it actually is a progression system based on cultivating, not necessarily just fighting. Like the main character can literally progress if he just stayed in one place and continued to cultivate accurately and efficiently. He would never really have to fight. He would actually progress on his path of power, building up his body, doing all the cultivation, refining stuff that you see in other stories, like improving bones and hardening them and changing his blood system and enhancing his muscles and skin, all the good stuff throughout the entire story. And he would progress without having to fight. But fighting is another way of progressing the story. And it would be kind of a much boring story if he didn't do any kind of action in combat. But that does exist in here. However, the the biggest drawback I think to the story is probably like the first 20-25% of the story. It's a little info dumpy. And what I mean by that is because there are 3 paths to power, because there were 3 separate systems of progression, they each have to be explained either by the narrator or the main character directly through a lot of exposition, which kind of ends up happening, or from talking to other people, which also ends up happening. And so there's a lot of information. Sometimes there are like multiple paragraphs going over to the main character trying to experiment the cultivation. It kind of expands a little too long for my particular enjoyment for pacing, especially compared with the lack of action sometimes in the first quarter of the story. But thankfully, once the main character actually meets some other survivors, some other people surviving in the world, the pacing does improve, I think, because he's done setting all the rules up for the system, essentially. Once he gets other survivors, you actually get to see him how other people have lived and survived in this RPG apocalypse after a week or so, I think, to see how the good people are surviving and how there are many, many bad people have trying to take advantage of the situation. I like the fact that eventually you do get to the bad people because those are your antagonists in the story. And that's, to me at least, much more interesting than just monster fighting occasionally, cultivating for a good long time, and then monster fighting again, which kind of happens, that ends up happening in the beginning part of the story. On the game mechanic side of things are okay. There's nothing really particularly new or special. Main author is definitely combining different types of path progressions or power progressions, but there's nothing like super different or new. The author doesn't do anything poorly either. There's lots of notifications, skill description, item description, character sheets, and even towards the mid-end story, a good bit of town building and that aspect of how that develops. The main character again chooses cultivation, so he does spend a significant part of the story doing things like clearing meridians, strengthening his bones, skins, blood, muscles, all that normal cultivation stuff. And when he does that, he increases his cultivation level, unlocks various bonuses, and increases his keep. So there's lots of that type of progression system. I mean, it all is still very LitRPG in that there are notifications to describe it and give you numbers that are hard-coded. So it still is a valid RPG progression system. Overall, it's a good read, I think. I enjoyed it more once I got past the slower beginning section for myself. Again, it doesn't do anything new, and the cultivation aspect was a little overexpanded occasionally. But again, I had a really nice time once you got to meet other characters, once you got to see the main character interacting with the world and see how his cultivation made him powerful compared to what the other people are doing, how the other cultivators, the other magic users, the other divine users, and how their power systems differed and structured and compared to each other and came in conflict. So I thought that once you have those opportunities for conflict, the story progressed much nicer, and that the tension was definitely better for me, at least, and the apocalypse stuff came out a little bit more. So for me, had a good time with it. Good middle of the road, good stuff. 7.5 out of 10 for Paths of Power Initialization book number 1 with a score of 7.5 out of 10, which is a good review score. Okay, next up is Eternal Dominion book number 1 Restart, written by Bern Dean. It is 254 pages, $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. Year 2286. Alec Bell has put in 20 years of work in the VR game Eternal Dominion, a full-dive fantasy VR MMO game that accounts for around 20% of the world's economy. He had risen to the top as a vice guild leader, and thanks to his work, his guild was steps away from truly becoming truly standing with the other top guilds. Only fate decided to rip it all away at the last moment. After his fall, Alex awakens to see his 18-year-old self looking back at him in the mirror. It's 2266, and Eternal Dominion is set to launch in a manner of hours. This time, things will be different. This time, he will succeed in life and make sure his friends and family go along for the ride, even if he has to drag them along to do so. Okay. I'll be honest, this story has been out for a little bit, a few months now, and I kept meaning to read, but I'll be honest, I wasn't really pulled into it from the cover art. I thought the cover art was like, oh, it's just like he's looking like you're wearing a football helmet on one side, and you got a dragon banner in the background. I'm like, there's nothing really like super engaging to me, so I kind of put it off until I had an empty spot in my reading schedule, and I saw that, oh, book 2 and book 3 are going out, and this book has really done pretty well in the reviews. Gave it a shot. I thought it was great. It turns out it's a regressor story. What that means is that somebody who is reliving their life with advanced knowledge of what's happening. That's in a nutshell what's happening. In this case, the main character is using that information to get an advantage in the just starting out MMO Eternal Dominion. And so he's literally there at day one, and he gets a chance to do it all over and to be the best at pop. He knows all the tricks. He knows all the secrets that he's learned over 20 years of hard experience in the story. And he knows exactly how popular and important and life-changing this game can be on an economic scale for him and his family in the world. And so he's using all that foreknowledge for personal gain and profit, and to take down the people and guilds that had harmed him in the past, potentially. And I like it. I'm always a big sucker for a regressor story. I think the theme of like getting a chance to redo things resonates with a lot of people, and I enjoy when it's done smartly. And when the main character is smart, I should say, about it. I've read plenty of regressor stories where the author or the main character just doesn't take advantage of his foreknowledge, and it just absolutely ignores all of the easy money making schemes possible out there by anybody who has two brain cells. And this character is one of them. He absolutely uses his foreknowledge to make gambling bets. He uses his foreknowledge to invest in companies once he has some cash that he knows are going to rise in value. And so I like that fact. He realizes that money's power, and as somebody whose family struggles in the story, he wants them to do better, and he tries to find ways and opportunities for each one of his family members to do well and to have an opportunity to do well if they wish to. And he tried to do not well for himself, but also for his friends, and by creating a guild and knowing all the tricks. And so there is your regular MMO adventuring stuff where he's doing quests, doing crafting, exploring the world, taking advantage of little tricks and rare instances, and just like these things from an MMO. But in addition to that, he's also doing guild building and guild management, and he knows who the bad players are and exactly kind of how they're going to make alliances in the future. And he's taking advantage of the opportunity now, at that point in the story, the early part where he can make a difference as a small guild. So there's all kinds of like nice, interesting social aspects there as well. And him getting the comeuppance on the people who are, bad in the story, the bad guilds, and so they're night. And additionally, I enjoyed that there are actual consequences to him changing the timeline, and to him being able to transfer goals from the game to real life. A lot of times that's not really done well in some stories, and it's done well here. So a lot of good things to appreciate here, especially the main character's long-term planning for both his in-game guild and outside the guild. So good stuff there. So overall, I liked the storyline. I like the various antagonist opportunities between the major guilds that are even established in the beginning of the story versus his little startup team. And also the balance between real life events, in-game events, guild building, and some crafting. So all kinds of good stuff to enjoy. Had a great time with it overall. Again, it's not super long, but it's not super short either for a literary story. Again, 254 pages. That's a pretty decent nugget. I don't know that I would buy the story right. The price is a little bit expensive for that, but it's a good Kindle Unlimited read, I gotta say. Overall, it's a great read that kept the pacing tight and entertaining. So for me, it gets a score of 8 out of 10. That's Eternal Dominion book number 1, Restart, with a score of 8 out of 10. Okay, next up is going to be Disillusionist, the LitRPG Misadventures, Fetch Quest, and Bog Gods, written by Tony Joy. It is 197 pages, $3.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. What's the smart move when playing a support class mage with no offensive magic to speak of? Undertake a solo adventure in a monster-infested bog, of course. Who needs a well-rounded party when you have second-hand daggers, illusions, and flexible morals? Dean? Probably. But he's not about to admit that. The last adventurer sent to the Pigmerton Bog for some routine fantasy world community service failed to complete the quest. So now Dean's goddess, has made it his problem. Spending days in a backwater bog town isn't Dean's idea of fun in the first place. With its seeking cold waters and lack of creature comforts, even the quest giver seems to think that this is some sort of hazing from Dean's faction. What started out as an unpleasant fetch quest becomes a nearly impossible struggle for control when Dean finds himself at odds with everyone who was supposed to support him and the forces of a lesser deity. He'll surely be able to thwart their plans with his ability to produce convincing illusions that cause absolutely no damage. Taking into account his allies, the alcoholic chemist, and a tavern mage, he's got this in the bag. Okay. This story has a terrible cover. I'll be honest. It's probably not doing particularly well in part because of this terrible cover. Like it doesn't draw in at all. This is a magic main character. He's completely, wizard race. He's an illusionist. And the story itself is pretty decent adventure. It's not the best in the world. It's also not very long, though. One of the things I appreciate. It's how I was able to get so many views this week. Done. The story is decent. It is an unusual main character as an illusionist with the boost of the class spells, but little else in the way of magic and minimal combat skills. The character is supposed to use those skills to get other players and take advantage of NPCs in a short quest. There's not much role building because it is such a short story, and so the focus is mostly on that quest and kind of the unexpected consequences of it, and how the main character uses his limited skill set intelligently, which is the only part I kind of enjoyed. The game stuff is consistent. The other sets of the main character uses illusion magic a lot, without necessarily running into resource issues, but he kind of sets it up so that the main character doesn't have those issues. He also tracks what spells cost, so he's making an effort at least to make sure you see that it isn't free magic. There are plenty of notifications, quest stuff. I didn't like the formatting of the notifications. I thought they were super annoying. They were all in caps with a hashtag in front of them, which felt a little codish. And it was just kind of visually distracting for me. Might come across better as an audiobook, reader, but there's no audiobook version. I'm just saying it might read better that way. But I found it to be kind of annoying. The way the notifications were formatted to my eyes felt unnecessary and cumbersome, but it's a minor gripe. Overall, it's kind of an okay story. It's not necessarily bad or anything. It's just kind of middle of the roadish, decent. I had an issue with the page count. It's a little short for me to really get fully engaged with the main character in a storyline, but it was okay. Like essentially a quest and some unexpected consequences and how the main character deals with them, all using his illusionist skills. You could tell that the magic system was a little stretched so the main character wouldn't be too disadvantaged. But it was balanced out by the fact that he doesn't have any combat magic necessarily. So that's the counterbalancing element. So there you go. So fine page, fine story for its page length, not the groundbreaking, but I appreciated the smarter feel of the main character. Give it a score of 7.2 out of 10. Enjoyed it, just on the lower end of enjoyment. The Disillusionist, the LitRPG Misadventure, Fetch Quest, and Bog Gods. Okay, that's it for the show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for listening to me talk about the genre that I love, LitRPG, and all the things about it. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, YouTube, Patreon, our website at litrpgpodcast.com, where we have the mega long database of all the stories we reviewed over the years, ebooks and audiobooks. You can look at all the past episodes of the podcast. You can also follow us on YouTube, of course, or you can listen to us, get us downloaded to your phone on a regular basis on Spotify or on Audible and any of the other podcasting apps that you may have and enjoy. But the latest episodes do appear weekly on Spotify and Audible rather, and also of course on our website at LitRPGpodcast.com. We also have links to the show notes to links to other Facebook pages where other LitRPG authors and readers get along together and chat and get book recommendations and just nice notifications about books that are coming out in audiobooks, and even some contests where you can get some free stuff sometimes. So look in those show notes for those. And of course, if you want to enjoy the podcast and want to support us and keep us free and ad free, of course, you can find all the ways to support us at litrpgpodcast.com/support. But again, thanks for hanging out with me today. And until we can hang out again, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.